Hello and welcome, Pookies. Today I wanted to show you how to crochet ribbing, which is how you make your project super stretchy. We're gonna go step by step. This is super beginner friendly. I'm gonna show you two different techniques. One is back loop slip stitching. The other one is front and back post double crochet. I'll also show you how to make these in the round, so like it's cylindrical, which is what you'll want to do for most cases. And I'm also gonna show you how to put drawstrings through these, which will make your project even more malleable and adjustable. For materials, you'll need some yarn, obviously. I just have some DK weight in white. Get yourself a hook that fits the yarn. Mine's going to be 4mm. Stitch markers are optional, but I will be using them. To finish off, you'll need a pair of scissors. You won't need a tapestry needle unless you want to weave in and make drawstrings. Let's start by making a swatch of back loop slip stitches. With this technique, you build up your waistband vertically. Let's start by making a slip knot. So hold the yarn between your thumb and index finger. Now wrap it around your index and middle finger to make a cross. Take your ring finger and hold down your working yarn. Now with your hook, go under the top right strand of yarn and then over the top left strand of yarn. Then go ahead and pull that off your fingers and then pull it tight. Now you have a slip knot. Now let's make a foundation chain of 10. To chain, just yarn over and pull it through your hook, and that's one chain. And we want 10 of these for the width. So those 10 chains will be the width of our swatch. Now we want to chain one more to start the first row. Now looking down the chain, it looks like a series of letter V's. We're going to be focusing on the left side of the V's. So when we work down the chain, it's going to be the loop that's on top. Now we're going to start from the second chain on the hook. So not the first V, but the second one. And we are going to slip stitch into that left side of the V. So to slip stitch, insert, yarn over, pull through, and then pull through the remaining loop on your hook, and now we have one slip stitch. Now this is optional, but you can mark this stitch, and you only want to mark that loop that's facing closest to you. So if you look at the whole stitch, there's also this V shape, but now it's facing the other direction, and we only need to focus on the loop that makes up the left side of that V. So we've just worked into that first V, now we're going to work into the next one. Now we're just going to continue slip stitching down the foundation chain in the top loop. I'm just going to slowly work down the chain in normal speed so you can follow along with me, and then once we reach the end of this first row, I'll tell you what to do next. At the end of the chain, you can count and make sure you still have a total of 10 stitches on your project. Alright, so now I'm finishing up the 10th slip stitch, and now we've gone all the way down the foundation chain. To start the next row, chain 1, and then you want to flip your project over so all the V's are facing the opposite direction. Now it's very important to make sure that you're inserting your hook in the correct loop. What's facing you now looks like the correct row of V's to work into, but we actually need the ones behind it. You can check by looking for the V that the loop on your hook goes into, and that corresponds to the correct row of V's that you want to work into. Now to start the second round, we're going to skip the first V and work into the second one. Again, into the loop that makes up the left side of the V. This is also known as the back loop, hence the name of the technique. Once again, after making the first slip stitch, if you like, you can mark the loop facing you. And then we're just going to slip stitch into every back loop all the way down the row. And I'll meet you when we're at the last stitch of the row where we have our other stitch marker. Okay, now we're at the final stitch of the row, and the last back loop that we have to work into is the one that's marked by the stitch marker. The purpose of the stitch marker is just to always show you which back loop is the final one you need to work into. This is because the project will scrunch up a little bit as you work. Sometimes it's very easy to just drop that last stitch because it's hard to see. Anyway, let's start the next row. Just like last time, we're going to chain 1, flip the project. Make sure that you're working into the correct series of V's by checking which V the loop on your hook is going in between, and starting from the second V, slip stitch again down to the end of the row. I'm going to stop marking my stitches from now on, but of course you can feel free to keep doing that if it helps you. Now I'm at the final back loop. If you have a stitch marker, it really helps to just yank on it a little bit before taking it out, and that'll really bring out the back loop and it makes it easier to insert your hook into. Now you know the drill. Chain 1, turn, and starting from the second V, slip stitch all the way down. I'm approaching the end of the row, and as you can see, that final back loop is practically hidden when you don't use a stitch marker. Sometimes what I like to do is just count back to see if my row is complete or not. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So there's one more stitch back here, and you have to really dig for it if you don't use a stitch marker, but as you can see, the back loop is right there. And sometimes I just take my index finger to really pull it out so it's easier to insert my hook. Now that's all you have to do for this first technique. You just keep going row by row, working into the back loops, making sure that you don't drop any stitches by either always using a stitch marker or just double, triple checking that you have that final back loop. I'm gonna make quite a few more rows of this so I have a decent sized swatch. You can join me if you want to practice, or you can also finish off here. But I will meet you when I'm happy with the size of my swatch, and then we'll move on. Okay, now my swatch is looking like this, and as you can see, it is really stretchy, but when you release it, it goes back to its original form. Now for me, this would be the perfect amount of rows for a sleeve because it wraps around my arm when it's fully stretched out. So say you wanted to make a sleeve, or this would even suffice if you wanted to make a sweatband or an armband. I'm going to show you the way that I usually use to join the ends of my projects together to make it cylindrical. Keep your hook where you left off, but make sure it's on the right side of the project, so as if you just flipped it over to begin a new round. Chain 1 to start. Bring the ends together. Now if you look at the starting row, you can see this series of loops that are facing most outwards. These are the front loops from the foundation chain that we did not work into, but we're gonna work into them now. Insert your hook into the back loop of the second stitch from your hook, as per usual, and then insert it into the rightmost loop on the foundation chain. Yarn over, and then we're gonna pull that through all 3 loops on our hook. So it's like one big fat slip stitch that connects everything. And we're gonna do that all the way down the row. So again, into the back loop of the next stitch, and then its corresponding stitch on the other side. And it's really important to ensure that both ends are always aligned. So first stitch on one end is slip stitched together with the first stitch on the other end, and then the second one with the second, and so on. So just take this slow, always make sure that you're going into the correct loops. Don't be afraid to backtrack and count, and you'll know you'll have done everything correctly when the final loops are aligned. I'm on my last stitch now, and as per usual, it's a tight squeeze, so really make sure that you're not missing it. I'm really using my index finger to push it up to my hook. And once you've connected the ends, your work is complete, and you have a piece of ribbing in the round. Now you could finish off here, but I'm actually gonna undo the attachment because I want a rectangular swatch. That way I can lay it flat on a surface and refer to it when I'm trying to figure out how many stitches I need to make whatever project I have in mind that uses this particular technique for ribbing. Let's move on to our second technique, known as front and back post double crocheting. This one builds up horizontally. Like the first one, we want to make a slip knot. Let's make a foundation chain of 18 this time. There's our chain of 18, and I'm gonna go ahead and mark the first chain from the hook, so the first V. Now to start the first row, we need height since we're doing double crochets, so we need to chain 3 more. This does not count as a stitch, it's just so we get up to the height of a double crochet. Now we're going to double crochet into that marked chain stitch. This time it doesn't really matter where in the V you insert your hook. I'm gonna go top loop again. Just make sure it's consistent all the way down the foundation chain. To double crochet, yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2, then yarn over and pull through 2 again. That's 1 double crochet stitch. Now we just have to double crochet all the way down this foundation chain for a total of 18 double crochet stitches. I'll do a couple with you in regular time, and then I'm going to go into time-lapse mode, and I will meet you when we're at the end of the chain. Alright, we are at the end of the first row. We should have 18 double crochets, and remember the chain at the end, even though it looks like a double crochet, does not count. To start the next round, we are going to chain 3 and flip our work. Now let's take a look at the row of double crochets that we just made. Double crochet stitches are tall, so they have this long body and you can really pull them apart because there's a large gap in between them. This body is known as a post, and what we're gonna do is work into these posts rather than the double crochet stitch itself. Let's start with the front post double crochet. Yarn over, then insert your hook behind the post so that the post is brought to the front. Now yarn over, pull that loop up back through the post, and then as you would for a regular double crochet stitch, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And that's a front post double crochet, and that has made these 2 stitches here stick out from the rest of the row. Next we want to do a back post double crochet. So same idea, yarn over as you would a double crochet, find that post. Now we want it to stick out towards the back, so hence a back post double crochet. So now you're bringing your hook to the front to push the post to the back. Now yarn over, pull up a loop, and then same as front post, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And now we see these posts sticking out in the other direction. Now for the third post, we're going to go back to a front post double crochet. You can take your finger and push the post outwards towards the front if that helps you insert your hook behind it a little better. And in the stitch after that, you guessed it, we are going to double crochet into the back post. This is the alternation that you want to do all the way to the end of the row. I'm going to work with you in normal speed. Alright, I'm now doing the final stitch of the row, and because we have an even number of stitches, this should be into the back post. Also make sure that you did not mistake this chain 3 here as a stitch. But now we've already got 2 rows with this ribbing, and it's quite stretchy already. Let's make a few more rows. To start the next one, chain 3 and flip. Now, the front posts from the previous row are now back posts and vice versa. So the first stitch you work into at the start of each row is always a front post. You can tell because it's poking out towards you and not away from you. So from here on out, it's really simple. You just follow the ribbing pattern as it appears, alternating between front post and back post double crochet. So now I'm at the end of the row, but the last stitch I've just done is a front post double crochet, which means I still need to work into the final back post stitch, which is right here. If it helps, you can go back and make sure that you've not missed any stitches by just counting back. Here I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So I haven't missed anything, and I just need to do the 18th stitch. It also helps to just pull this wide to make sure that you're not working into that chain 3. It has a tendency to curl forward because of the ribbing. But once you have that final back post double crochet, the third row is finished and we can move on to the fourth. Alright, so I've done some work off camera and now my swatch is 5 rows tall. And I'm happy with this. This is the height that I like for my waistbands, so I'm gonna go ahead and finish off. And now I'm just gonna keep this swatch somewhere handy so that I can refer to it to figure out measurements for when I want to do this kind of ribbing for projects. Now making this in the round is slightly different. We could just bring the ends together and sew them or slip stitch them, but I'm gonna show you what I do with a new swatch. Let's make a slip knot again, and this time let's create a foundation chain of 34 stitches. Feel free to make it longer or shorter as you like, but this time it's really important that you have an even number of stitches for this foundation chain. Once you have your foundation chain, we're going to close the chain so that it turns into a circle. It's very important here to make sure that the chain is not twisted. So I just run my fingers along and make sure that those V's are all facing me. Now I'm taking the tail and I flip it over, so now I'm facing the back side of the chain. You can tell it's the back because the chain stitches will have these little bumps in between them, and you no longer see the V's like you do in the front. These are known as back bumps, and for our first round, we're actually going to be working into them. Insert your hook into the back bump of the first chain stitch that we made at the very start of the chain. This might be a bit of a tight fit. I like to just use my index finger to push that bump onto my hook. Now yarn over, pull through, and then pull through again. With that slip stitch, we've joined the chain and now we have a circle. Chain 3. Again, this does not count as a double crochet stitch. Now in the same stitch that we slip stitched into to join the ends into a circle, we're going to do a double crochet. Now all we're going to do for the first round is just go around and double crochet into every single back bump. These can be a little hard to identify at first, but we can see the back bump that we've already worked into because it's been kind of stretched open. So the next back bump will be really small and right next to it. Just take your time to insert your hook slowly, and we only need to do this for the first round. And I will meet you at the end of the round to explain what to do next. So now I'm at the final back bump of the round, and I can check that it's the last one by either counting back, or I can also see that the one next to it is the foundation chain of the start of the round. So I'm just going to quickly do my final double crochet here, and the first round is complete. So now we have to close the round, and it's very important here that the project is not twisted in any direction. So go back and check that all the stitches are facing upright, nothing is folded. To close the round, we need to slip stitch into the top of the first double crochet we made in the round. So not the starting chain 3, we're just going to ignore that, but the stitch that's directly next to it. And we're going to insert our hook into the top of that stitch, and we are going to slip stitch and pull it tight. And that closes the first round. To start the next round, chain 3. Now is where we start the technique of double crocheting in the front and back posts. Again, make sure that you're not crocheting into the starting chain of the previous round, but into that double crochet stitch that we just worked into. And just like last time, I'm going to start with a front post, and then in the next stitch is obviously a back post, and then a front post, and then a back post again, and so on until you've reached the end of the round. And the final stitch of the round, because you have an even number of stitches, should be a back post double crochet, and that's how you know you've reached the final stitch. So I'm going to complete this round in time lapse, and then again I'll meet you at the end to close off the round. now I'm at the final stitch of the round, and as promised, it will be a back post. That's how I know I haven't dropped any stitches or made any mistakes. And just like the previous round, we are going to slip stitch into the first double crochet of the round. So not the foundation chain, but the stitch to its left, and it should be a front post double crochet. But we're not going to slip stitch into the post, but into the actual double crochet, so into that V that's at the very top of the post. And once you finish the second round, the ribbing has appeared. Let's start the third round together as well by chaining 3 as usual. And now that we have ribbing, it's very easy to start the round into the correct post. We simply need to do a front post double crochet into the front post that is immediately to the left of the chain that you just created. And that's all you have to do. Just continue alternating between front and back post double crochets as you build up the round. Just make sure to slip stitch into the starting double crochet at the end of every round and chain 3 at the start of every round. I just made a few more rounds off camera, and now I'm going to finish off. Feel free to make a few more rounds in your own time for practice, or if you get the hang of it, feel free to just unravel or finish off wherever you are. But whenever you're ready, I'm going to show you how to make drawstrings and then put them through your projects. Alright, the last thing I want to show you guys is how to put a drawstring through your ribbing. The drawstring itself is just a long chain, but I'm going to make it long enough that it wraps around the swatch that I just made, plus a little bit so that it can be tied at the front. So I've made my chain long enough so that it can wrap around the swatch, and there's a little excess at the end so that it can be tied. I'm going to finish mine off here. And then I'm going to take my tapestry needle and then thread it through one of the tail ends of the drawstring. Now, as you can see, the chain doesn't actually fit through the eye of the needle. Don't worry too much about that because the needle is mostly just for guidance anyway. Now, the ribbing made with front and back post double crochets is much easier to thread the drawstring through because the gaps are large. So in the same way that you would tuck your hook through when you're making a front post double crochet, you just need to thread your needle behind the front posts and pull the drawstring through. There should be an opening behind the front posts large enough for the needle and the drawstring to go through without much trouble. I'm just gonna go all around my swatch here. As you can see, you can even go through multiple front posts at once. Front posts here make it super easy to thread the drawstring, so I always like to do front and back post double crochet whenever I need to make a project that requires a drawstring. So now I've gone all around, and I'm just going to adjust the drawstrings so that the same length is poking out on both sides. And from here I can tie these ends together if, for instance, I want to make a skirt or a pair of pants tighter around my waist. Now, inserting a drawstring for back loop slip stitch ribbing is the same idea, but because the stitches are so densely packed together, it's going to be much harder to actually do it. As you can see here, it takes some pushing and pulling to get the drawstring through the stitches since they're so small. You also need to leave more rows in between each needle insertion because the rows are closer together. There's no front loops that you can just follow, so you'll have to decide manually how far apart you want each weave-in to be. It's also harder to keep the ribbing on the same line, so it's still possible to insert a drawstring, but I don't like using this ribbing technique when I need a drawstring, just because it's difficult and annoying. You could also just put a single strand of yarn, but then obviously it's not as secure. But I digress. Here's what it looks like with a drawstring through the other technique. As you can see, I literally damaged some of the yarn because I was pulling so hard. There is an argument to be made about this technique looking better with drawstring, but there you go. And that was it for this video. I hope it was clear and helpful and inspiring. Let me know in the comments what kind of projects you intend on making, what kind of struggles you still have, and what you want to see for more videos in the future. Thank you so much for your support, and I'll see you next time. Bye!